Ryan Jeffrey, and this is the Passionate About OSS podcast. The purpose of the podcast is to shine a light on the brilliant minds in the OSS and telco industry, to describe a little bit about their background, knowledge, tips, and techniques. Today we'll be taking a closer look at developing a market for your OSS BSS. Our guest has got a brilliant background for marketing in OSS. He's been in the industry and working with these tools and promoting these tools for around about 20 years, with icons such as Alcatel-Lucent, InfoVista, Comptel, Nokia, and even Alcatel and Comptel coming back to Nokia and is now with Digital Route. He also has a really strong technical background, so technical training back in the days of Newbridge Networks and as a technical consultant at Alcatel. He's now head of product marketing at Digital Route, and I'm delighted to have him on the call because he's a brilliant marketing strategist. Welcome to Steve Hateley.
Thank you, Ryan. Nice to be here and good to talk to you.
Great to have you on. So Steve and I first met back in around about 2012 when Passionate About OSS was just starting to make a presence via our blog. He was working at Comptel and came across to Melbourne to lead Comptel's brilliant Next Day roadshow. So we'll talk about Next Day in a little bit more detail later. But I never really asked you, is that one of your brainchilds?
It was a collaboration, really, of a couple of us in the marketing team, with myself and my colleague who was looking after the BSS side of the portfolio. And we also worked with a professional storyteller who also helped us to really build, because it was going to be such a big workshop. It was, we got some outside help to really help us construct the flow of the thing. And then we took it on from there. We spent a couple of days with him and then we took it on and developed it further. But like you said, it was an excellently successful and fun roadshow to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it was more than just a roadshow, but maybe we'll get back to that a little bit later. So, your networking and OSS journey goes a little bit further back than 2012, though, back to Newbridge Networks. But even before that, your stint with the Royal Navy, and that really heavily involved avionics. Are there many parallels between avionics and telco software?
Well, obviously, communications in the part of the Royal Navy that I was in. So I was in the Fleet Air Arm, and working on fixed-wing jets and also attack helicopters. So, but each of those obviously have got their own communications systems. But unfortunately, I wasn't working on the communication systems in the helicopters. I was actually on, as you said, avionics and also weapon systems. So, no, there wasn't a direct bridge. The bridge really came when I left the Royal Navy and went to work for GK and Westlands, who were building the Navy's next state-of-the-art helicopter, the EH-101. And I went into the training department of GK and Westlands, and we were building computer-based training packages for the Royal Navy to use as they learnt about the new helicopter. So in there, really, it was about understanding in the minds of the engineers that were going to be using the new helicopter, what did they need to know about the helicopter, and how we could get it across to them in the best way. So we had to formulate questions and the appropriate responses and content that we could put out to them on computer-based training.
And fascinating. So was that really the bridge between a career in the Navy and the first steps towards being in the telco and OSS industry that you're in now?
Well, I kind of got brought in by chance, really, into the training department because I was working in a training department into the training department of Newbridge Networks, who at that time were employing a lot of ex-forces personnel, purely because of their experience and ability to articulate themselves, because in the military, you're encouraged to articulate, speak up, be direct, etc. So they were very keen to recruit ex-forces people into that department, regardless of their background. So I basically went there, gave a presentation to them. I think it was a helicopter-based presentation, actually, and got the job more or less there and then. So I got into telecoms the back door by coming in through the training department.
And do you think those learnings and that ability to communicate has really shaped your approach to marketing for the more modern career that you've had?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in a training department, and especially the way that I did it by coming in with no experience of comms, you're instantly dragged into a technology that you don't know, using a plethora of acronyms that you've never seen before. And all of a sudden you've got 4 weeks to learn it and then articulate it and present it to an international audience of people who had paid good money to fly in from all over the world to sit down and listen to you speak. So it's kind of a baptism by fire, really. However, looking forward now, 20 years on, I can see that that experience of having to think on my feet and work out how to articulate the story of how to teach this product has really, stood as a good background for what I do now.
Mm-hmm. And without DBA, death by acronym.
Yes, yes, yeah. Avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah. And you were really in for the heady days at Newbridge, where ATM was all the rage. What did you train people on?
Well, I came in just before ATM, actually. ATM wasn't a thing when I got there. They were just moving away from X25, and I started training on the 3600, which was the mainstream TDM switch. So I did that, and it was basically a case of learning all of the individual cards which were slotted into there to switch across these 8 kilobit time slots between.
Massive.
Yeah, exactly. 8 kilobit time slots switched in a matrix between the cards in the control plane. And we used to program it. Forget network management. We used to program that using CLI for each individual circuit. So it was properly, without consciously knowing it, I properly got into the technical of the TDM switch. But we did the 3600 and then the multiplex version of that, which was the 3645, where you could put together, I think it was 4 or 8 of those shelves together to form a big multiplexer. And then we were also teaching CPSS, which was whether you remember that was the Newbridge proprietary switching protocol, the control package switch system. We used to teach on that, which was the, like I said, the communications protocol. And then I moved on to the 46020 at the time, which had been the 4602. And that was the network manager, which was one of the only network management platforms that could actually properly manage a telecom service end to end across multiple domains. So it was fairly revolutionary, really, what that platform could do using CPSS to construct these services which spanned across multiple domains, which previously had only been done by linking together multiple element management systems to build that end-to-end service. So the 46020 had a really good reputation back in the day.
And clearly very, very technical roles that you had, but you then made the move to product marketing and you've been there ever since. So that must have been a really inspired decision. What triggered the change from being really technical, hands-on with that training to more of the product marketing roles?
Well, I'd done a couple of years there in training, and I'd kind of moved as far as I wanted to, really. I'd done quite a lot of the technical equipment, and the 46020 was then, by that stage, managing the 36170, which was the ATM switch. And I just decided to step into pre-sales, to be honest. I went into pre-sales, but I only did that for 12 months. The line-to-line responses on RFPs and RFQs really did kill me off quite quickly. Sitting there day in, day out, just responding with boilerplate responses. But the one thing about that role was that occasionally we got to present the responses to customers on site, at workshops. And that was what I really enjoyed. So the opportunity came up that they were looking for a product marketing manager in Europe for the 46020, ironically. And I stepped into that role, and I was working with our Canadian R&D team and the MPI team in Newport in South Wales. South Wales in Wales, as opposed to in your part of the world.
Yeah, the New South Wales, the old South Wales.
Yeah. And yeah, that was a really fun time actually, just going out and presenting. But the funny thing was, at that time, network management, and it was for many years after, was still just a black art, because the world was dominated by by Cisco and by IP, and they were really leading the way with Juniper, and everything was CLI based. It was just so CLI centric. So you go out there and, you've got a 3-hour workshop with a customer, 2 hours, 45 minutes, we'll be talking about cards and slots and backplane technology of the hardware, and shown through CLI. And then, oh yeah, we've got 15 minutes at the end. Here's the network management guy. He can give you a quick overview.
Well, I'm impressed that it was 15 minutes. I thought it's more like 2.5 to 3 minutes. And do you think the tech background really helped that or hindered the transition to marketing? I have some thoughts in mind, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about whether it helped or hindered.
No, it definitely helped. Anybody that's in this part of the industry, or this industry in general, if you're doing a product marketing role, you need to have a good technical understanding, at least of the principles of what you're trying to market, because marketing gets a bad rap anyway. So we're the greatest liars on the planet, according to most people. And you say you're in marketing, and they either look at you as if you're a complete fabricator, or they look at you as if you're just talking up in the clouds, and what you're saying doesn't make any sense anyway. So I think what's absolutely critical in a product marketing position is to make sure that you're telling the truth and the facts. Don't bend the facts. Don't lie about stuff or over exaggerate what you're trying to position. Just make sure that your story is right for what you can actually deliver. I mean, yes, okay, you can still market things which are 6 months, sometimes at a stretch 9 months down the line, because that's how long the sales cycle is in telco generally. But anything further ahead than that, where you don't have a lockdown roadmap, it's you shouldn't really be doing product marketing. And
I guess just the fact that you have an understanding of the products that people would use would give you a little more empathy for what the marketing messaging would be. Like what are the stories or what are the benefits that the products are there to help solve for those techie people who maybe are still on CLIs in some cases?
Yeah, I like to think of it as, our role in product marketing is to keep sales honest, but at the same time help product management articulate what they're trying to sell. Because you've got two separate aspects there. Product management are building something that they have been told to build, or a number of customer requirements have come in, and so they're building based on that, and they're just building a product. And then if you try and take that directly to market, all you end up doing is pushing a load of features which are perhaps not differentiating or not of value. So basically you're talking to somebody that's not listening. But at the same time, if sales get wind of a new product and they don't get it articulated to them correctly in the terms of what the customer's looking for, then there's a tendency to over-exaggerate, over-promise, and then ultimately under-deliver. So that's why I think the product marketing layer is a really important layer in the way that we take products to market.
And it's interesting too that you talk about the crossover with sales on product, because in the roles that followed, you really appear to have been at the nexus of marketing, sales, product, solution, corporate comms. Would it be safe to say that that's really the intersection point that's vital for success of any company, especially top line?
Yeah, it certainly helps. Anybody that's setting out in a product marketing or a marketing position, even if you're just starting off in marcoms, my recommendation would be, over the next 10, 15 years of your career, try to find yourself into the different responsibilities and roles of marketing, because then you get an appreciation for what your department are looking for from you. So, by having the experience in Marcom's kind of positions and global management of the team position and digital marketing, and a number of other roles which I've done, I now understand that if I'm asked for, right, we need some text for our social media posts. I know the type of social media posts that need to be written to get the points across. When you talk about lead generation, ultimately that's managed by your customer marketing team. But as a product marketer, you need to understand, right, then we need to do lead generation. What's going to be an attractive message that will help with that lead generation process? And there's lots of interdependencies there between the marketing team. So I think a good understanding of all of those roles is good. And if your career path is ultimately taking you towards a CMO role, which I still haven't achieved yet, but if you are heading towards a CMO role, then that's absolutely necessary. You need to have experience in all of those positions, I think.
And I guess from my experience, they've all got different lingo. It's almost like talking different languages, and having the ability to be the translator across those different languages for each of the groups would be quite fundamental and an important consolidator of information to get the message through end to end.
Yeah, and it's also, you test and you validate, and when you especially, the messaging is the most important thing, because that spans all interested parties. So the key is when you start on your message creation, you are working with a team of people from different departments. You're working with R&D if you need to understand what's really behind the features that you're trying to position. You're working with the product management team, the product owners. You're working with obviously sales leadership, because they're ultimately putting the sales strategy together. All of the marketing departments, working with training to understand how they're going to train the product. There's a touch point in every part of the organization, really. So you just need to collaborate and make sure to get the message right.
And how close do you tend to get to customer as well, and interacting with them to create the marketing message? So instead of sitting in the ivory tower or taking indirect information from sales, how close have you tended to get to the real customer and their feedback?
It's not easy, to be honest. You're looking for, what you really need is a real advocate of your product and your company, for them to be willing to speak to you about the value of your product to them. More recently, I think people are so time constrained that they can't find time to speak to you about this type of things. Again, like going back to, it's just marketing. It's not important. There's always the next project which has got a budget assigned to it that what needs to be executed, and sales are all over that. Or ultimately, being software, there's always bugs and things that need to be resolved. And if they are issues within a customer, then they won't let you go and tell us how good the product is, if they've got problems with it. So, there's usually quite a few stumbling blocks to try and get in front of customers to get their opinion. I think the best way to do it is to form the relationships at things like industry events, which I've done numerous times. Just form relationships with people, whether they've listened to you speak, or whether you've been at a dinner and they've been at the table with you and you formed a relationship that way. And then that's the way that you can get to really talk to people in an informal way.
And Next Today is the perfect example of that too, I guess, is the roadshow that actually took you out and talking to customers. Perhaps now's a good time to tell us a little bit about Next Today. So to me, it seemed really significant as an initiative for Comptel, and I've still got one of the books on the bookshelf behind me. I don't really recall seeing anything else quite like that initiative out there in the industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. Comptel took a really big step when we employed a new CMO some years before the acquisition, Ari Vantanen, who came in as our CMO. And he came in from a different market. He came in from the security market, and he looked at what we were doing through a completely different set of eyes, because we were all telco people through and through. And because of his creativity and his energy, we were allowed to really flex our muscles a little bit and be a bit more creative in our thinking. So we developed this paradigm of using Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We actually mapped future telecom services to that. I don't think whether you remember that. And then we used
I found that quite interesting. I may have even blogged about it, actually.
Yeah, I think you did actually. Yeah, going back to it. And then we really, we worked on this symbiotic and mutually beneficial relationship way back then. I mean, we're talking, how long ago was that now?
2012.
7 years. Yeah, quite a while ago. We were talking about that relationship between IoT, cloud, and 5G, and how they mutually will benefit each other moving forwards. And we didn't know that back then. I mean, this is kind of, just think about it logically, about the way these things need to operate. They're all going to be based on data and the richness and the strength and the accuracy of the data that's being used, which ultimately led to the analytics play in telco. And we talked about how 5G was going to be, this ultra fast technology which needed to be rolled out to do these new future type services, where IoT would play a key role in terms of taking intelligence to the customer, to the edge, and then talking about the cloud as the means for storing and processing data. And I mean, we were talking about that way back then. So we were actually, as Comptel, we were quite ahead of our time, but we didn't even know it. And then I think the success of the Next Today roadshow. I mean, we did over the two, because it ran for 2 years, and we did 2 or 4 books. I think we did in the end. We did, I think it was over 30 roadshow locations, and we actually spoke face to face to over 300 customers, individuals. And that was because they were such small workshops, we were building one-to-one relationships with the people that attended. And it was just, I think the success of it was really on the back of we were more informational and, with a very visual approach than just turning up and saying, right, we've brought in 6 product managers, they're going to talk about 6 different products, and then we're going to leave. I don't know whether you remember the analogy that I did with the toothbrush. I pulled out a toothbrush that I'd got off one of the flights that I'd taken, and basically just having a conversation like who's got a toothbrush, and then we led then that we had a personal conversation with everybody that was there about toothbrushes and how to brush your teeth, and then we got on the topic of the connected toothbrush from Philips. And then ultimately we got that round to, but what do we do with the data that's being collected? Oh yeah, well, it's going to go through a Bluetooth connection into your phone. Your phone's going to upload it onto the cloud, and there you go. You're processing data that's going to be used for monetization for Philips and other companies. So we really, just by using a simple principle like showing somebody a toothbrush, we got onto the topic of data processing in the cloud, et cetera, and monetization, which really went down well.
I think one of the other things that I found interesting is that producing the books as well, you got a number of really interesting people to talk about the industry from all sorts of different angles, from very much different than just a pure product marketing play. And you had all sorts of interesting guest writers on that.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Again, down to Ari. I mean, Ari's vision there was, to bring in these people from parallel industries, who were not just, let's not think about telcos talking to telcos about telco. Let's look at, what are the industries that will benefit from telco services? What are the industries that will become part of the telco ecosystem in the future? And let them talk about how they see the future for using telco is. There was a big question I used to ask a lot of people, was because the audience was primarily telco, it was, do you see in the future that IoT will be a part of the telco industry vertical, or do you feel that telco will be part of an IoT industry vertical? And the amount of telco people that said, well, IoT will just be part of telco. But of course, in reality, IoT is far bigger than telco, but it just, leverages telco as one of the ways to get the communication across. So it's a really interesting, I say interesting, depends what your team is interesting, but it's an interesting dinner conversation just to drop that question out. Do you think telco is part of IoT, or IoT is part of telco? And I think it's quite clear now where we are now.
Well, it's interesting too. So telco people, we probably do get the blinkers on and think through the eyes of just the telco lens. So it doesn't surprise me, that answer. I suspect you'd still get that answer today from a lot of people.
Yeah, we did a workshop in Malaysia, and we got a professor from the Singapore Institute there to come and talk to us. And he literally raised that point. He said the reason why there's very little innovation in the telco space at that time was because we all go to the same events, we all listen to our peers talk about business that we're familiar with, and we all read the same telco journals. So there's no surprise that there's no innovation. And that really was the catalyst where we decided to put together the next day concept and have people from around the industry to give a broader perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That was what really resonated with me, that's for sure. And also, you've clearly had intersections across many of the technology elements of OSS. So assurance at InfoVista, fulfillment with Comptel, the network layer at Alcatel. OSS obviously covers a really broad estate. Do your marketing strategies have to differ widely across companies and across those technologies?
Not really. In fact, to be honest, I think it goes broader than that. I mean, the principles that you adopt especially when you're doing product marketing, should be transferable skills across multiple verticals. I mean, I've primarily worked in telco pretty much most of my life. However, especially within Digital Route now, where we've got a significant enterprise play, I can see that employing the same techniques about describing product and offerings and value propositions is going to be similar to what we've done previously. A product is a product ultimately. It needs to have a value. It needs to have a purpose. So it shouldn't really matter which vertical industry it sits within, to be honest. There obviously are going to be the nuances of what specific things do, but generally how you build your messaging and your value propositions should be more or less the same.
And given that you've risen up the corporate ladder into very senior and very global roles, have maybe your approaches, your thinking, your strategies changed over the different time, and potentially even across different regions? Do you find your approach has changed much?
I think the shift has really come from back in the early days. If I think back to the Alcatel days, just after they acquired Newbridge, when I was doing the product marketing of the 46020, it was very much back then the idea that you would take a product, you would understand the features, you would push those features out, and literally it's push from the bottom up, from the bottom out. You would push the product into market, not even thinking about what the target audience was. Really just pushing it out and saying, look, wave a flag in the air. We've got this product. It does this. Does anybody want to come and buy it? But I think over time, as I've matured in marketing roles, you really develop the understanding that you've really got to be thinking about, your product needs to be pulled from the market out. So, you need to be looking at what are the specific challenges the market's facing. Who are the people who are going to be interested in your product? Can you tailor your message specific to those people who are going to be either the influencers or the buyers of your product? So it's really been evolution through experience, as I've moved through. And in terms of is there differences between markets and regions, etc., there are the specifics about various regions in the way that you articulate, but we haven't necessarily, other than the maturity of those markets for the adoption of the products, we haven't really tailored a specific message just for a specific country, etc. Or not in the roles that I've had to. I'm sure, it is needed in many industries, but I haven't had to do that yet.
Yeah, and that seems to have been my observation as an outsider looking in on the market, that we tend to do global campaigns or campaigns to the regions that each vendor serves more so than a specific articulation for different regions.
But like I say, I mean, the nuance there, it really is where they are in the maturity curve in the adoption of the technology, So, I mean, cloud native is a typical example. There are some countries in the world that are further on their cloud native adoption than others. There are some that are a lot more developed in 5G than others. So there's no point going to, let's say, Central Africa, with a message about cloud native, evolved, advanced, innovative 5G services with every IoT aspect, self-driving cars, because the infrastructure is not in place yet. But you could certainly go and have that conversation in places like Japan. So that's really where the nuances lie, I think.
So looking back over the years, are there any particular campaigns that have had really significant impact, and are you able to articulate why they were successful?
I mean, there's a few that come to mind. I think the first one, when I really noticed I was doing something different, was when at InfoVista had always had Vista Insight for networks for many years. IP performance management, primarily on a Cisco infrastructure, multi-vendor, so it also supported Juniper and the likes. But ultimately, it was based on Cisco's requirements for performance management. And the Vista Insight for networks was a product which we detailed the features, release by release, pushed them out to market, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden we came up with Vista 360, which was a dashboard where you could get a higher level perspective on the performance and how it impacts the actual performance of the company and its network, which is far more aligned to what customers wanted to see than this screen by screen, drill down by drill down traditional product. So, I mean, we managed to, the CTO took on that project with a few developers from Russia, I believe. And we had some Russian developers on that one. And we turned that around, and working with Marcoms, we pushed that out really, really quickly. I think within 3 months, we'd gone from development to launch. That was a real success. And it was the first time really that we did it. I'd launched a product based on the way the user wanted to see the data that they needed. And then more recently in NetNumber, actually, we had the opportunity to do two really interesting launches in the last 18 months or so. One of them around Stir Shaken. So Stir Shaken being the network security solution, which is really high profile in the US at the moment. About stamping out robocalling. So that was a really interesting launch that we did there. And that's still ongoing in NetNumber, actually, because that's very much a hot topic. And then we also launched a brand new platform, cloud native platform at NetNumber called Titanium, which, was also a very successful launch. And this was literally, we had to give compelling reasons why customers would move away from a very traditional switching, routing, and security platform onto something which is cloud native, innovative, that could take them forwards into future requirements. So that was a fun one to do with Titanium. And of course, that theme, cloud native platforms, is carrying across into many of the OSS and BSS platforms now anyway.
And do you have any, I guess, generic thoughts on how to best market OSS and BSS solutions that tend to be very technical, but also the people who you market to are at multiple different levels, from the sponsors have got a different message that they need to see to what the technical influences are, and potentially even the users. You got a particular generic approach on how to think about OSS BSS as a marketer?
Like I've said before, it's not so much marketing OSS has got a specific approach. I think as long as you've got the underlying principles behind it. So it depends. When we say marketing, we generally market through campaigns, and campaigns don't have to be new product launch. They can be, just raising awareness on a specific feature type. You can do a campaign based on a piece of content that you're releasing, or just make, there's something in your existing product which suddenly has become very relevant and you want a campaign around it to generate interest. So, you basically construct your campaigns based on what you're trying to achieve, whether it's lead generation or brand awareness. If you take a launch, for example, there are a number of steps that you would do in order to put a launch together. So obviously you'd do your research and you'd get your insights on the product itself. On the market itself that you're going after. This would be things like market analysis, competitive analysis, undergoing a primary research project with a major analyst. And then also gathering insights from the field. So, who are the likely influencers and buyers associated to the product that you're launching? You'd look at, what are the observed and the perceived challenges associated to what you're trying to launch against and deliver against. And then also, your touch points. So you'd look at, where do I need to outreach in order to get the most interaction and engagement with what you're trying to say. So that's kind of the research and insights piece. Obviously, then you'd need to look at your message development, which is absolutely critical, because there's a number of key things within messaging that you need to pull together. And then look at a content creation plan or a content management plan. What content do you need? Do you just need white papers? Are you going to do video? Video has become a very popular means of getting content out there. So I don't know about you, but I'd much rather be clicking on a website and watching a 30-second video than having to download a 12-page white paper and find the time to read that. So you need to think about your content strategy as to what's going to have the most effect. If you're doing a technical launch, for example, it may be that a 12-page white paper is something that's most appealing to the people you're trying to sell to. But if you're pitching something at a much higher level, at a business level, then it could be that a 30-second video is going to be more attractive to that type of audience. So you need to strategize about what the best content's going to be.
And you've really emphasized the launch there. You find that is a lot more of an amplifier than just, say, a trickle effect of content release or marketing information release?
Yeah. I mean, that launch, to be honest, that launch process would span over, let's say 9 to 12 months. It'd be a long tail campaign in most cases. So you wouldn't suddenly push everything out at once. You'd have a content plan where you'd be building, let's say you've got a blog series, which is going to span over 3 months, or you've got 3 white papers you're going to release with 2 months in between. So you keep the conversation going and keep the narrative going around the new product that you're trying to launch.
Interesting. And I kind of interrupted you before you fully got the rest of the answer out, I think.
There's after you looked at your content creation plan, you can then look at message testing. So have you got the message right? And what you said earlier about, do you talk to customers about messaging? That's the point where you would try and engage friendly customers to see, would this make sense? And also test it with key analysts who are specialists in that area or that domain that you're trying to sell into. And then you pivot the messaging accordingly. And then another important phase I found is market setting. So I call it market setting. So prior to the actual launch of the product that you're going to bring out, let's say 3 months before, start going out there and being a corporate or an industry citizen, I should say, where you start talking about themes which are going to be ultimately associated with the product you're about to launch. If you come out cold with a brand new product which has got a brand new unique value proposition, you're literally hitting a wall as soon as you come out into the market. So really what you ideally want to do is warm the market up to your conversation.
Almost the pre-launch.
Yeah. Start talking about the themes that you are ultimately going to be delivering against, without saying, we've got a product, if you know what I mean. There's ways to do that. And we did that fairly recently with NetNumber before I left on the cloud native platform launch. And then, of course, you then got to consider, as part of your launch, you've got to consider your sales and your partner enablement processes. So how are you going to sell this? Is it direct sell? Is it through a partner ecosystem? How are you going to sell it? And can you enable them well enough? Internally, you need to launch your product internally before you launch it externally. So everybody's on board and they know what's coming out. They don't get caught by surprise. And then plan your external launch, which ultimately you'd find a good vehicle for. And usually a good vehicle for external launch is something like a major industry event. Many people do things like Mobile World Congress is normally a platform for major releases. And there's other key events which go on. There's Mobile World Congress in Asia, TMF in the OSS and BSS case. The old TMF in Nice is always a good place to plan a launch around. And then then you've got to consider your advertising tactics and your social media plan associated to that. And then ultimately you then start capturing the leads and work out what you want to do in terms of nurturing the leads that you're generating based on the content that you've pushed out, which is ultimately held behind a firewall or a gateway, so that you swap the content that you're offering for a bit of data about somebody who's downloading it.
So that kind of closes the loop on the lead generation part.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been fairly generic there in terms of the principles and processes behind what you would employ in a marketing tactic. And you can see that could apply to any product, really. There's nothing specific there for OSS. It's just the way that you message. That is where you define, the differentiation of it being an OSS product versus a standard product or whatever it may be.
And do you tend to follow a fairly standardized or formulaic approach to your launches? So there's obviously a number of steps that seem quite sequence there in the way you describe them.
Yeah, you map that onto your timeline. So, I've always asked product management, I've always asked to let me know at the product inception stage. So when product management are at a point where they are discussing a new product concept, before the features are locked down, before any of that is hardened, involve product marketing, because ultimately when it comes to launch, you need to understand what was the reason why we decided to launch this product in the first place.
In fact, is that your 2 minutes out of the 3 hours again, just like OSS is an afterthought? Is marketing also an afterthought for product?
Exactly. And in a number of companies, not the OSS BSS companies, but in a number of companies where I've worked, it's been common to get 8 weeks notice of a launch, where the product has already been cooked, it's already been locked down, the roadmaps have been approved, the first release is due out very shortly, and it gives you no time at all to do all of your campaign planning to maximize the effect of the product launch.
Obviously, from what you've described, the content, the storytelling, the copywriting, I guess, is such an important tool for any marketer. Do you have a standardized approach to content development, say story arcs or focus areas, or is it more of a as needs basis, so for each launch or each campaign that you're doing?
Yeah, it's relevant to the actual launch or campaign that you're doing, to be honest. You'll get the ideas, you develop the message, you develop the ideas of what you want to launch and why you want to launch, and then look at the best and most efficient ways to get that message out. The problem with a lot of white papers that are written in support of launches, they necessitate the input from product managers, to write down and define what the product is and what it does and why it does what it's been told it does. But it's the wrong people. So you go after product managers who are literally run off their feet trying to get the product out the door, and you're knocking on their door saying, "Can you write me a white paper?"
It's not.
And 9 times out of 10, product managers are more than willing to say, "Oh yeah, of course, I'll get that done." But it's not very high on the priority list because you've got customers knocking on the door waiting for the first release.
Yeah.
So what I've tended to do is engage with real high quality media agencies who know the industry, not just random generic content writers. content developers really working with people in the industry who have got their own media capabilities, understand the industry, have got resources that they can call upon to get proper, good quality papers written. And I've got no bones to shout out Mobile World Live here, who wrote a couple of excellent papers for NetNumber for us. And the way that we went about doing it was literally just engaging with a writer from the agency to interview 1, 2, or 3 people from the organisation who have got different perspectives on what's been launched or the theme. So it could be the product manager they interview, it could be the head of sales that they interview, it could even be the CEO, or it could be the CTO. Whoever you can find to give a good background onto why we're doing this product launch. And then let somebody else write that for you, and you take that out. It may cost you a small amount to get it written, but the quality of what you get delivered is really high. And that's one tactic that I've kind of I've taken on.
And that's really, really interesting as well. So I guess I also get the impression that a lot of the white papers and a lot of the collateral in our marketing is written by technical people, and therefore it can tend towards the overly technical or overly complex. Is that something that you see as common, or maybe is that a common mistake that you see others producing?
It comes down to the persona and the role that you're targeting with the product. I mean, if ultimately what you're selling is a really technical thing. I mean, NetNumber's products and portfolio and solutions were technical. I mean, they were deep within the network. It was signaling firewalls. It was DSCs. It was STPs. It was more acronyms than you could possibly imagine.
DBA.
It was a technical thing that was being built in NetNumber, or is being built in NetNumber. So there is a requirement. You are selling to ultimately network architects and those sort of people. So you do need to have technical writing in there. But at the same time, as well as the technical people who will ultimately be the influencers in the buying cycle, you've also got to appeal to the people who are looking at the business side of it. And how is this purchase that we're about to make going to benefit the business as a whole? So you've got to also have what people would term as the marketing white paper, which talks the business language and talks about, value proposition to the business, that you're serving.
Do you think it works where it's actually a combination? So the business white paper mixed with the technical white paper?
There, you will find papers that are written like that. But to me, that's companies that don't know who they're targeting with the message. I mean, even technical white papers will have an executive summary at the beginning, they should have, which outlines the market or the problem that's been solved by the product that you're launching. But you can't do a detailed business value proposition, return of interest statements, etc., in the same document that you would do all of your technical details of bits and bytes and how the product works within the network and network architecture, because it's appealing to 2 different audiences. Now, maybe you don't have the resources or the cash, the budget to fund 2 papers. You're going to put it in one, and then you're just going to, campaign that to 2 different audiences, which you can do. But to me, it makes the content overly long and confusing in what it's trying to say.
Interesting. And so there's a truckload of information out there on marketing approaches and so forth. But for such a small industry, a small niche as OSS and telco, are there any particular rock stars or mentors or sources of information that you've really looked that have guided you through your period?
I mean, if I look back at, my managers who kind of steered me down this course, Lutz Rakow was the director of product marketing back in the Alcatel days and Newbridge days. He started me on this marketing journey really. And, we worked it out together, to be honest, as we move forward. When I went to InfoVista, I had a close relationship with the CEO there, Philippe Bazanian. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2020. But I used to have some really good conversations with Philippe in terms of where the industry was going, why it was going the direction it was, why InfoVista was moving in the direction they were moving. And those were good times. And that was quite good to hear directly from the CEO, the things that he was trying to achieve with the company, so that when it came to doing the marketing piece, you knew you were aligning to what the objectives of the company were. And then I've already mentioned Harry. I mean, Harry came in and Harry really tipped the needle in terms of transforming the way that I looked at marketing. Yeah, he was very instrumental in that. In terms of rock stars, there's a number of them out there. I think the only one really that I have read and listened to is Simon Sinek. Mm-hmm. And I think Simon Sinek's model of, why, how, what to define the message, divine messages is something that I stick by. Defining why am I talking to you? That's the first principle. Why have I got something to say? Talking about the market opportunity, the challenge that's being faced, etc. The how, which is then talking about how that challenge should be addressed or how it needs to be addressed or approaches that need to be taken to address that challenge. And then ultimately the what being, what as a company we are offering you to help solve that problem. And then that breaks down even further. So within the explanation of your offering, you then need to define the four main areas of concern that your buyers will have. How will it help me make more revenue? How will it help me save operational costs, particularly in the OSS piece? How does your offering help me minimize the risk? If I was to deploy and buy your product, how can I be assured that it's not going to take all my services offline? Am I going to lose any customers? What is the risk involved? And then more recently, one that came about, I suppose, in the last 10 years is how can I connect to my customers better? And those, if you can define your message based on those 7 points, then you're not far off getting a basis for a compelling message.
You've talked a little bit about NetNumber, and NetNumber was kind of just really on the verges of the OSS BSS industry, but you're now back really in the trenches with BSS with Digital Route. Are you able to tell us a little bit about their scope, size, products, offerings?
I can certainly share I can share what's public and what I know already.
Oh, of course, yeah, of course.
So Digital Route has been, I suppose, on my radar of interesting companies for many years. When I was at Comptel and we were pushing the mediation, convergent mediation propositions, Digital Route was always there as a key competitor. We were 1 for 1 in a lot of cases. And then this opportunity arose to go back. And what's different now is, I think what's been done with Digital Route, they are really at the forefront of where the industry is heading with the way that they're positioning themselves. I think the unique value that they've got to the market is that, as well as being telco specialists in terms of, the whole mediation story with the platform they've got and the amount of customers they've got in terms of capturing and processing and assuring the revenue and the data that's coming in from networks. They've also got a very good footprint in enterprise. So there are only few companies that can say that they are both telco and enterprise. And I think that's important because of the convergence that's going on at the moment, where, I talked about the symbiotic relationship before about IoT, 5G and cloud. There's another similar one going on now, which is enterprise telco and hyperscalers, where they are really converging into building a common set of interests and approaches to what they take to the market. Obviously, the hyperscalers are coming in with their stacks with AWS, etc., which is being used in a common way by enterprises and telcos in order to situate their systems. In terms of the telcos proposition, telcos, that have been specialists in providing connectivity and speeds and feeds to consumers and enterprises are now in a position where they are looking to help enterprises in their own right. So, it's not just a B2B proposition. I'm going to provide a VPN to enterprise X. it's now saying, right, then I'm going to provide you a connectivity package which is going to help you work into your clients in the industrial enterprise or in finance or wherever. And telcos are finding themselves reaching that extra step into enterprise, which they haven't necessarily had to do before. And the good thing about Digital Route's position is by understanding the enterprise requirements and knowing what telcos need to do to get the right data out to serve those enterprises, Digital Route find themselves in a unique position where they can serve this crossover or this converged opportunity, which is good. So the company was founded in 2000. They've got approximately 240 people worldwide, so about the same sort of size as Comptel. And then there's two approaches. There's the main mediation zone platform, which has been out there for a while now. There's a new version of Mediation Zone 10, which is cloud native, and it serves all the needs of 5G, etc. In a very strong way. But it's also got the background and legacy knowledge that's been pulled through from the earlier Mediation Zone releases. And then they've got the new usage data platform, which is teed up as a software as a service platform to serve these requirements of enterprises who are moving their innovative new business models from, if you think about the way the market's moving, you may have seen some of the talk about this in the industry about the move from ownership to usership, where if we think about our own lives, how much do we own now compared to how much have we subscribed to? So myself, I look at my music. I haven't bought a CD for how many years, I don't know, because I'm subscribed to a music service. There's a lot of companies now where you can, you lease your car for a small amount of time just to get from point A to point B, and you don't need a car for a majority of the time. So why would you own a car that sits on your drive and it's an expensive asset that just depreciates? So there's loads of different innovative business models which have kicked in and accelerated over the last 12 months with the pandemic, which I think helps, justifies Digital Route's position and standing and value proposition to the enterprise and to the telco market.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point you make too around the usage data, because yes, it's really, really changed since the old days of the voice CDRs and the data that was collected then. The point you made about touching the three different segments and aggregating the data so that you can look to monetize that usage data in different ways and new business models is really fascinating to me as well.
Yeah, the whole complexity piece as well. We talk about innovative new business models that can be created by these modern enterprises, really, who are leveraging 5G as an underlying enabling technology that enables their business to do what they want it to do at high speed, low latency, and good reach. Yeah, and you think about the ecosystems that are involved in some of these complex billing models, especially when you look at industrial in enterprise, for example. Within a factory, you've got autonomous vehicles moving around factories, moving stock around. You've got manufacturing machinery, which is working autonomously and controlled remotely. And, there are companies that are supplying robotics into these companies as vendors to these enterprises, to these industrial enterprises. And there is a reliance on getting data back from that machinery to say how much was this machinery used at a certain point in time, how many hours has it used, how many miles has it traveled. There is so much data floating around these complex use cases that it's absolutely essential that a platform that Digital Route's that's got a platform like that, which can properly pull in this data from multiple sources, make sense of it, eliminate errors in the data, and consolidate in a way so that it can then be used for monetization, as you said.
And really nascent kind of technologies or nascent abilities, does that make your job as a marketer easier? I guess the purple cow, as Seth Godin calls it.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can get passionate and excited about a proposition,
as you clearly did, just with what you
Yeah, I
articulated
know.
just then.
I do apologise. When I truly believe in something, I do tend to get a little bit excited. But
Don't we all?
that's my job. That's what I have to do.
Yeah. So I assume Digital Route's marketing and sales propositions, particularly sales propositions, are really too sophisticated to simply track click-throughs on digital products. How do you really close the loop? We talked a little bit about it earlier on, of using the kind of content offering for a potential customer or prospect to provide their details, which then becomes a lead. There are other ways that you look to close the loop. Is it more personal customer interactions, internal interactions, other marketing metrics that help you close the loop?
Yeah, a lot of the metrics these days are brought in by analytics tools. I mean, if you think of, we go back to, campaigns, which is, the heart and soul of what a marketing department runs. Those campaigns will be built on a database of connections or contacts that you've got within your sales platform. So Salesforce is a typical example of your CRM. That will ultimately have a marketing automation platform attached to that. Something like HubSpot or Pardot that I was using in NetNumber. And within that platform, then you can then build your marketing automation processes. So you can automate your emails, and then you can monitor the responses of who opens, who clicks on any of those things that you're sending out to your customer base, which gives you good metrics. Those are people that you already know of. So if they're in your database, you've got contact details, you have email addresses, and you have phone numbers in some cases. You've got full names, you know the role of that person, you know the job, the company they're working for. So if you're sending out, as part of your campaign, a targeted campaign, you're sending out an email to a specific segment of your target audience, you can work out how successful that campaign has been as you progress through the campaign. And then, if after 3 weeks after sending an email, you've only had 500 people open it of 20,000 that you sent it to, you know that you need to pivot the message. So you can then tweak your message accordingly and see if you can get, a better open rate on your next email. And then this is all talking about prospects that you already know. These are people that have previously downloaded content and submitted a form for you. Then you look at the people that you don't know. So with those people, you've got to look at nurturing tactics, where you are, first of all, seeing from an IP address, is there an IP address which is regularly clicking on your website? Are you seeing a lot of activity there? So is there anything that you can offer to that IP address that may tempt them to click, download, and fill in a form to download a piece of content, at which point they are in your database, and you can work on your nurturing campaign then to get them extra information or really drill down to what they're looking for and serve their needs. So, Google Analytics is a good way to monitor that sort of traffic of people that you don't know. And then you've got your ad campaigns as well. So you've got paid advertising, which you can run through Google Ads. You can do it through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great tool to reach the audience that you're going after as well. So there's a number of tactics that can be employed to understand your target audience, how you're reaching them, if they're interested in your message, etc., etc.
People often talk about fishing in a barrel, so you know exactly the audience or where you're bound to catch fish. So I haven't really seen a common place where everybody really gets together, other than, say, the conferences you talked about earlier and LinkedIn. Are there any other particular places where OSS, BSS prospects tend to congregate?
Well, like you said, conferences, I think for OSS, BSS, I think, it has been for how many years, 20 odd years and more, digital transformation world, telemanagement forum, whatever you want to call it, telemanagement world, has always been the place to have those sort of conversations with OSS and BSS people. The other place, LinkedIn, to me, LinkedIn is the best place you can go to reach the right audience. And you just have to, get your message right. and talk about pertinent topics that people will read and accept. The old physical face-to-face events has really, as you know, dropped off the radar in the last 12 months, and I think it's going to be slow to return as well. What we did see was two things. You had companies that were doing an innovative approach to running online events. So things like, Telecom TV, if you know Telecom TV, their events are very debate-based, audience interaction, real face-to-face conversations going on, even though it was on a video platform. But the quality of what they put out is so high that was still getting, really good rates. Where I think the problems were where you had people who were traditionally running physical events, face-to-face events, and they literally just took that entire face-to-face event online and expect the same audience return. And when you've got a catalogue of a number of face-to-face events, you will cherry pick what you can budget to afford to travel to. Is it relevant to what I'm actually trying to do? You really can cherry pick the ones that are interesting. But all of a sudden, we've been inundated and flooded by emails to join online events. And I think the interest in that has really waned. Those sort of companies are really struggling. I mean, Mobile World Congress, they've tried to get Mobile World Congress back off the ground this year, assuming that, the pandemic will be under control. And you've probably seen it as I have, the number of big names that have pulled out of this relaunch of Mobile World Congress this year, has been quite a statement, really. People aren't confident enough to return to those events yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's the interesting thing with an event at Nice where you're there for 3-4 days, that you're a captive audience, whereas I guess with a lot of the online sessions, we might book into those and then listen to part of it, but then get distracted by urgent emails or phone calls, and
Absolutely.
So the attention's lost a little bit with some of the online conferences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think companies need to think a little bit cleverer about the sort of events that they're putting online. If you're going to do a webinar, just do a 30-minute webinar. People are more likely to find 30 minutes in their calendar because it's a coffee break. Finding a full hour when people, like you say, they'll tune in, but they're not really listening. They're doing emails and other stuff. Sell it as a coffee event. Just be innovative about it, and the way you pitch it. You don't have to tell everything on a webinar. Just set the scene, gather the interest, and then put plenty of follow-up actions on the end of it for people to get more information. There's a number of things that can be employed.
So we've covered a pretty broad estate today, and we've covered a lot of really interesting areas. What does the future hold for OSS and telco, in your opinion, and how are you specifically positioning for it?
I think as we discussed a couple of times, I think the move to using cloud-native platforms, the move into cloud, software as a service, the shift from ownership to usership, these are all important things which are, where OSS and BS platforms will start to play. There's more and more vendors, you look at their marketing material and everything is, it's a cloud-native platform. Which being cloud native isn't the thing, but what it means being cloud native is that you are agile, you can be flexible, you can re-engineer, you've got agile development processes, you've got more efficient ways to roll out and deliver new software releases. So just the very fact that you are working in a cloud native environment means that you can serve your customers better, I think. So I think, we'll see an increasing amount of vendors who are talking, the cloud native story. And then, this whole move to, treating customers different, thinking about the business to human effect. How are people running their lives at the moment? And like I said, it's around subscriptions. Not everything will move to subscription, of course. But I think it means that, your future is predictable. So business models, if you can get your customers onto subscriptions, then you've got predictable incomes that's coming in, predictable revenues.
Unlike the really old, lumpy, big projects, like probably back in the InfoVista days, it would have been multi-million-dollar projects, but they come in really lumpy streams of revenue.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, subscription economy isn't the be all and end all, because I had it mentioned to me earlier today. It's great being in a subscription economy, but there is still, you'll still get locked into subscriptions, and there'll still be penalties to get out of subscriptions. But it just gives people the opportunity to tailor their work and personal lives more contextually to the way that they run their lifestyles. And that's why I think it's going to be an ever increasing trend, really.
And any beliefs that you hold contrarian to what you feel like the rest of the industry believes?
That we have mentioned, we touched on the big conferences, the big events, the Mobile World Congresses and the similar sort of events that you get around the world. I'm not a big believer that the amount of money that is spent on those massive events gives the return that you're looking for in the short term. I recount this one event that I did all the time when I was at InfoVista. We did a network performance management event. It was very focused, and that's all that they talked about, network performance management. I think it cost us something like $5,000 to attend and sponsor. There were 5 sponsors, but there were 30 operators represented in the room. And all of the 5 sponsors were from different domains, so they spoke about different topics. The sponsors were given the opportunity to pitch what they did, and all of that was for, I think it was £5,000 or €5,000 at the time. And out of that, we got countless leads and follow-on conversations. So I think, going for more targeted events, where you've got a real targeted audience and you've got a very specifically targeted message, I think that is sometimes better than just spending half of your marketing budget for the year on a single event, just so that you can have a bigger booth than the people next to you.
Perhaps the next day of today. So would that
exactly.
approach still work successfully today?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, the principle behind what we did with Next Today, and also the Next Today events that we ran in Finland. I mean, it wasn't just the tour that we did; it was also I think we did 3 events in total, where we actually, as a company, we ran an industry event that really looked at a 360-degree view around the products that we offered and the solutions that we offered. Those sort of things, which make the industry a bit more interesting.
For sure. Yeah, again, we've covered quite a bit today. Are there any particular pearls of wisdom or anything that I've perhaps overlooked that you'd like to talk about?
Not really. I mean, I work to the principle of get the story right. If you can't have a conversation, you got to think about it as make it conversational, make your narrative conversational. Could you stand in a pub and have this conversation with the person you're trying to sell to? Or do you have to be standing in a room with a laptop open and 50 slides to present? Just make your proposition, make your message conversational, and make it correctly targeted to understand your audience, really.
Brilliant. So yeah, we've covered some great topics. If there are people out there who are listening who would like to continue the conversation, where can they find you?
LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm a big advocate. I'm always over there, and I do apologise if I've got a little bit passionate during your passionate about OSS.
I loved it.
Discussion.
No, it's been fantastic. I really appreciated you dropping in on the podcast, Steve. Really fantastic insights, and it's been a pleasure having you on.
It's been fun. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks also for the audience. We look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thanks for listening to the Passionate About OSS podcast. You can find more episodes, more than 2,500 blogs, and our contact details over at passionateaboutoss.com.